Jessica Morgan, 32, stood frozen in her wedding dress, as her phone displayed the text that would forever change her relationship with her sister. "Sorry sis, got a last-minute opportunity to go to Paris with friends. Can't miss it. We'll make it up to you. Hugs and kisses." 6 years later, as Jessica watched her now famous sister Rachel step off the private jet, returning home for their father's funeral, neither of them realized how this reunion would expose long-buried family secrets and trigger a chain of events that would bring their past betrayals full circle. Hey there, my amazing viewers. Before I dive deeper into this shocking family drama, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Are you Team Jessica, or already sensing that Sister Rachel might be in for some karma? Drop a like if you've ever experienced family betrayal, and don't forget to hit subscribe to catch more incredible stories of revenge and redemption. Now, let's get back to how my perfect wedding day turned into the beginning of my carefully crafted revenge. I had always been the responsible one in our family. While Rachel chased dreams of becoming a fashion influencer, I built a steady career in marketing, saved for my future, and maintained our family relationships. My wedding to Daniel was supposed to be the reward for all my practical life choices. He wasn't just any man, he was brilliant, kind, and yes, the heir to a tech fortune that put him firmly in the millionaire category. But I fell in love with him before I knew about his wealth, back when we were both working late nights at the same marketing agency. Our engagement was a whirlwind, and I wanted a small ceremony with only our closest family and friends. My sister Rachel was supposed to be my maid of honor. We had spent months planning together, or at least, I thought we had. Rachel had always been the prettier sister, the one who turned heads and collected admirers like trading cards. But she had seemed genuinely happy for me when Daniel proposed, even helping me choose the perfect dress. The morning of my wedding dawned bright and clear. My hair and makeup were done, my dress fit perfectly, and my parents beamed with pride. Only one thing was missing, Rachel. At first, I thought she was running late, as usual. Then came the text. So casual, so dismissive of what was supposed to be the most important day of my life. "Sorry sis, got a last-minute opportunity to go to Paris with friends. Can't miss it. We'll make it up to you. Hugs and kisses." I called her immediately, my hands shaking. The call went straight to voicemail. My mother tried to console me, saying Rachel had always been impulsive, but this was different. This wasn't forgetting to return a borrowed sweater, or being late to a family dinner. This was abandonment on my wedding day. Daniel found me crying in the bridal suite, and sat beside me, holding my hand. "We can postpone if you want," he offered, his voice gentle. But something hardened inside me at that moment. I wiped my tears and shook my head. "No, we are doing this today. With or without her." The ceremony went ahead, but Rachel's absence felt like a physical thing, a void where my sister should have been. I smiled in the photos, danced with my new husband, and accepted congratulations from our guests, but inside, a seed of resentment had been planted. Later that night, scrolling through social media, I saw it, Rachel posing in front of the Eiffel Tower, champagne glass in hand, with a caption that read, "Sometimes you have to seize the moment. #Paris with BAE." The timestamp showed she had posted it during our ceremony. The friends she mentioned turned out to be a man, Jason Turner, a photographer I recognized from her Instagram. The man she had apparently deemed more important than her only sister's wedding. Daniel found me again, this time staring at my phone in the hotel suite. "She's in Paris with some guy," I said, my voice hollow. "She missed our wedding for a date." "I'm so sorry, Jess," Daniel said, taking the phone from my hand and setting it aside. "But don't let her ruin this day for us. We have our whole lives ahead of us. He was right, of course. But as I lay awake that night, listening to Daniel's steady breathing beside me, I made a promise to myself: I would never allow Rachel to hurt me like this again. I would never again be vulnerable to her selfishness. And someday, somehow, I would make her understand exactly what she had done. The next morning, I made another decision. I blocked Rachel's number and removed her from all my social media. If she couldn't be bothered to be present for the most important day of my life, she didn't deserve access to any part of it. When my mother called, concerned about the sudden silence between us, I was firm. She made her choice, Mom. Now I'm making mine. The honeymoon in Bali was a welcome distraction. Daniel and I spent lazy days on the beach and explored ancient temples. He never pushed me to talk about Rachel, understanding instinctively that some wounds needed time. By the time we returned home, I had almost convinced myself that the ache of betrayal had subsided. Almost. 6 years passed in what felt like both a blink and an eternity. Daniel and I built a life together that exceeded even my most optimistic dreams. His tech company expanded internationally, and I left my marketing job to start my own successful PR firm. We bought a beautiful home in the suburbs of Boston, traveled extensively, and began discussing starting a family. From the outside, my life looked perfect. Rachel, meanwhile, had leveraged that Paris trip into a burgeoning career as a travel and lifestyle influencer. I never followed her accounts directly, but news of her success reached me through my parents and mutual friends. She had hundreds of thousands of followers who devoured her glamorous posts from exotic locations around the world. According to my mother, Rachel had even launched her own clothing line and written a book about living authentically, a concept that made me laugh bitterly when I heard it. We avoided each other at family gatherings, maintaining a cold politeness that our parents pretended not to notice. I declined invitations to holidays if I knew she would be present, sending Daniel alone with carefully wrapped gifts and rehearsed excuses about work commitments. Rachel did the same, her absences coinciding suspiciously with my appearances. Our father, always the peacemaker, tried several times to broker a reconciliation. "Life's too short for this, Jessie," he would say during our weekly phone calls. "Whatever happened between you girls, can't you find a way past it?" But I couldn't find the words to explain that some betrayals cut too deep to simply forgive and forget. It wasn't just about missing my wedding, it was about the pattern of selfishness that had defined our relationship since childhood. Rachel always taking, me always giving. Rachel always shining, me always in the shadow. The wedding had simply been the final, unforgivable confirmation of where I stood in her priorities. In the rare moments when I allowed myself to think about her, I wondered if Rachel ever felt remorse. If she ever looked back on that day and recognized what she had done. But then I would see another magazine cover featuring her perfect smile, another interview where she spoke about authenticity and following your heart, and the anger would flare anew. Daniel worried about me sometimes. "You're allowing her to have power over you still," he said one night as we sat on our deck, watching the sunset. "By holding on to this anger, you're giving her space in your life that she doesn't deserve." I knew he was right, but releasing that anger felt impossible. It had become a part of me, woven into the fabric of who I was. Besides, my strategy of avoidance was working. I had successfully excised Rachel from my day-to-day existence, and my life was better for it. Or so I thought. Then came the call that changed everything. My mother's voice on the phone, broken and barely comprehensible through her tears. My father had suffered a massive heart attack. By the time the ambulance arrived, it was too late. He was gone. The world tilted on its axis. My steady, reliable father, the man who taught me to ride a bike, who helped me with my math homework, who walked me down the aisle, was suddenly, irrevocably gone. The grief hit me like a physical blow, leaving me gasping for air. "Rachel's flying home tomorrow," my mother said, her voice small and lost. "The funeral is set for Saturday. Please, Jessica. Please be there. Your father would want both his girls together." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of her request. For my father, I would endure seeing Rachel. For him, I would set aside 6 years of estrangement and stand beside the sister who had betrayed me. But I wouldn't forgive. I couldn't. "I'll be there," I promised, my throat tight with unshed tears. "For Dad." As I hung up the phone, Daniel wrapped his arms around me, holding me while I finally broke down. Between sobs, I managed to tell him about the funeral arrangements, about Rachel's impending return. "Do you want me to come with you to pick her up from the airport?" he asked, stroking my hair. I shook my head vehemently. "No. Mom can do that. I'll see her at the funeral home, not before." But fate, it seemed, had other plans. The universe that had kept Rachel and me apart for 6 years was now determined to force a confrontation. Because the very next day, as I pulled into the grocery store parking lot to pick up food for the grieving relatives arriving at my mother's house, I saw her, Rachel, standing beside a taxi, looking exactly like the polished, perfect social media star she had become. Our eyes met across the parking lot, and for a moment, neither of us moved. 6 years of silence stretched between us like a physical barrier. Then, surprisingly, she raised her hand in a tentative wave. And despite everything, despite all my promises to myself, I found my hand lifting to wave back. The funeral home was packed with people whose faces blurred together as I moved through the crowd in a fog of grief. Daniel stayed close by my side, his hand at the small of my back, a steady presence as I accepted condolences from family, friends, distant relatives, and my father's colleagues. My mother sat near the closed casket, a tissue clutched in her trembling hand, looking smaller and more fragile than I had ever seen her. And then there was Rachel, dressed in a simple black dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, her hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She moved through the room with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to being watched, stopping to hug old friends and accept condolences with graceful nods and appropriate tears. I observed her from across the room, noting how she carefully maintained her distance from me. The minister spoke eloquently about my father's life, his dedication to his family, his 40-year career as a high school science teacher, his passion for gardening and woodworking. As the service progressed, people stood to share memories, stories that made the crowd alternatively laugh and cry. I sat rigid in my seat, afraid that if I allowed myself to feel anything at all, I might shatter completely. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the podium on legs that felt disconnected from my body. I had prepared remarks, carefully typed and folded in my pocket, but as I faced the sea of sympathetic faces, the words seemed inadequate. Instead, I spoke from my heart about the father who had always believed in me, who had taught me the value of integrity and hard work, who had loved me unconditionally. My dad was the first person to teach me that actions speak louder than words, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. He showed his love not through grand gestures, but through consistent presence. He never missed a single important moment in my life, not one. My eyes found Rachel's in the crowd, and I saw her flinch. It hadn't been my intention to wound her with the comparison, but I couldn't deny the satisfaction that flared briefly in my chest. After the service, we gathered at my parents' house, the home where Rachel and I had grown up. I moved mechanically through the rituals of grief, accepting casseroles from neighbors, making sure everyone had drinks, engaging in the strange small talk that seems to be required at post-funeral gatherings. All the while, I was acutely aware of Rachel's presence, like a splinter under my skin that I couldn't quite reach. It was late evening when I finally found myself alone in my father's study. The room smelled like him, books and pipe tobacco, though he'd given up smoking years ago. I ran my fingers over his desk, the wood smooth from decades of use. On the wall hung family photos, Rachel and me as children, gap-toothed and grinning, my parents on their 40th anniversary cruise. Daniel and me on our wedding day, my smile bright, but my eyes holding a shadow that was visible even in the photograph. He was so proud of you. I turned to find Rachel standing in the doorway, 2 glasses of wine in her hands. She offered one to me, a peace offering I wasn't ready to accept. "Don't," I said, my voice low. "Just don't." She sighed and set both glasses down on the desk. "Jessica, it's been 6 years. Dad is gone. Do we really need to keep this up?" The casual way she referenced our estrangement, as if it were a silly game we'd both been playing rather than a wound she had inflicted, ignited my carefully banked anger. "Keep what up, Rachel?" "The consequences of your choices. You chose a weekend fling over my wedding day. You chose a photo opportunity over being my maid of honor. You've been choosing yourself over everyone else your entire life, and somehow you're still surprised when people stop expecting anything better from you." She flinched as if I'd slapped her, her perfectly made-up face crumpling for a moment before she regained control. "That's not fair. You don't know what was happening in my life then." "Enlighten me," I challenged, crossing my arms. "What could possibly have been so important that you abandoned your only sister on her wedding day?" Rachel opened her mouth, then closed it again. She looked around the study, her eyes lingering on the family photos. "It wasn't just a fling," she finally said. "Jason, he was offering me a chance to be part of a major fashion shoot in Paris. It was my big break, the opportunity I'd been waiting for my entire life." I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. "So you traded your sister for your career? Is that supposed to make me feel better?" "No, it's supposed to make you understand," she countered, her voice rising. "You always had it figured out, Jessica. The good grades, the sensible career, the perfect fiancé. Everything came so easily to you." "Easily?" I echoed incredulously. "You think my life came easily? While you were partying and dating your way through college, I was working 2 jobs to pay my tuition. While you were posting bikini pics from Cancun, I was pulling all-nighters to make partner at my firm. Nothing in my life has come easily, Rachel. I worked for everything I have." "Except Daniel," she shot back, her eyes flashing. "You didn't have to work for him, did you? He fell right into your lap, rich, handsome, and conveniently ready to give you the perfect life." I stared at her, stunned by the bitterness in her voice. "Is that what this is about? You're jealous of my marriage?" "I'm not jealous," she said, but the flush creeping up her neck betrayed her. "I just think it's interesting that you lecture me about making sacrifices when you married a millionaire." The unfairness of her accusation left me momentarily speechless. When I found my voice again, it was deadly quiet. "You don't know the first thing about my marriage or my husband. You chose not to be there, remember?" Rachel looked away, her posture deflating slightly. "I made a mistake, okay. I've regretted it every day since. But you never gave me a chance to make it right. You cut me off completely. What was I supposed to do? Welcome you back with open arms after you showed me exactly where I ranked in your priorities?" Before she could respond, my mother appeared in the doorway, her eyes red-rimmed but alert. Girls, I need you both to come with me. There's something we need to discuss. We followed her in confused silence to the kitchen, where Daniel waited along with my father's attorney, Mr. Patterson. The elderly lawyer looked uncomfortable, his hands fidgeting with a thick manila envelope on the kitchen table. I wasn't planning to do this today, my mother began, her voice steadier than it had been all day. But given the circumstances, I think your father would want us to clear the air now rather than let things fester any longer. She nodded to Mr. Patterson. Please, go ahead. The lawyer cleared his throat. Your father left specific instructions about his will and certain family matters. Before I read the official documents, he asked me to give you this letter. He handed my mother a sealed envelope. She opened it with trembling fingers and began to read aloud. My dear family, if you're reading this, then I've left you too soon. I'm sorry for that. There are things I should have told you all years ago, truths that might have changed the course of our family history. But fear and pride kept me silent, and now I can only hope that my final confession will bring healing rather than more pain. My mother's voice faltered, but she took a deep breath and continued. Jessica and Rachel, the rift between you has been the greatest sorrow of my final years. I've watched you both suffer, both too stubborn to reach out, both nursing wounds that run deeper than either of you know. There is something you both need to understand. The day of Jessica's wedding, I called Rachel and begged her not to attend. I gasped, my eyes flying to Rachel's face. She looked as shocked as I felt. I told her, my mother read, her voice now barely above a whisper, that if she loved her sister, she would find any excuse to be elsewhere that day. I told her that her presence would only bring pain and shame to our family. And I told her why. I told her, my mother continued reading, her voice trembling, that Daniel was not who Jessica thought he was. That I had discovered something about him that would destroy her happiness if it came to light. I convinced Rachel that by staying away, she was protecting her sister from a painful truth on what should be the happiest day of her life. The room spun around me. I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter, trying to process what I was hearing. Daniel moved toward me, concern etched on his face, but I held up a hand to stop him. I needed space, needed air. Dad told me that Daniel was involved with another woman, Rachel said quietly, her eyes fixed on me. He said he had proof, photos from his private investigator friend. He begged me to stay away so I wouldn't have to lie to your face on your wedding day. That's absurd, Daniel interjected, his face flushed with anger. I have never been unfaithful to Jessica. Not once, not ever. My mother continued reading, her knuckles white around the paper. What Rachel didn't know, what none of you knew, was that there was no other woman. There was no infidelity. The truth is much more complicated and much more painful. Years ago, long before Daniel met Jessica, his father and I had a brief affair. The letter dropped from my mother's hands, but she continued speaking, no longer reading but confessing. It lasted only a few months, but it nearly destroyed our family. Your father forgave me, but he never forgot. When Jessica brought Daniel home, and we realized who his father was, your dad was convinced that Daniel had discovered the connection, and was dating Jessica, as some kind of revenge plot. I looked at Daniel, whose face had gone pale. Did you know? I whispered. He shook his head vehemently. I had no idea, Jess. I swear to you. My father never mentioned your mother's name to me. Ever? It's true, my mother said, wiping tears from her cheeks. We confirmed it later. Daniel had no knowledge of the past. But by then, the damage was done. Rachel was in Paris, you two were estranged, and your father and I were too ashamed to admit what we'd done. Rachel sank into a kitchen chair, her perfect composure finally cracking. You're telling me I missed my sister's wedding because of Dad's paranoia, and your affair from 20 years ago. We're telling you that we made terrible mistakes, my mother said, reaching for Rachel's hand. All of us. Your father carried the guilt of what he did to you girls to his grave. His last wish was that you would know the truth and find a way to forgive, not just each other, but us too. I felt Daniel's hand on my shoulder, steadying me. 6 years of anger toward my sister dissolved, replaced by a confused mix of betrayal toward my parents and grief for the time Rachel and I had lost. There's more, Mr. Patterson said gently, pulling a document from his envelope. Your father's will. He has divided his estate equally between you both, with one condition. We waited, holding our breath. The condition is that you spend 1 week together, just the two of you, at the family cabin on Lake Winnipesaukee. He specified that you must go within 1 month of his passing, and you must stay the entire week. A strangled laugh escaped me. Even from beyond the grave, my father was trying to fix what he had broken. The cabin had been our happy place as children. The site of summer adventures, winter ski trips, and countless family memories. If you refuse, the lawyer continued, the entire estate will be donated to the local Science Education Foundation. I looked at Rachel, really looked at her for the first time in years. Behind the perfect makeup and designer clothes, I could see the sister I had once shared everything with, secrets, dreams, heartbreaks. She looked back at me, her eyes swimming with unshed tears. So, what do you say, Jess? She asked, her voice small and uncertain. 1 week at the lake. For Dad. In that moment, standing in our childhood kitchen surrounded by grief and revelations, the answer seemed obvious. Yes, I said. For Dad. I felt Daniel squeeze my shoulder in silent support, and for the first time since receiving that devastating text 6 years ago, I allowed myself to hope that perhaps my sister and I could find our way back to each other. As the reality of what we'd just learned had settled around us like dust after an explosion, I realized something else. This story, our story, wasn't finished yet. There were still secrets to uncover, wounds to heal, and perhaps, a sister to truly forgive. Wait, before I continue with what happened next, I need to take a moment to check in with you all. This revelation hit me like a ton of bricks when it happened, and I'm curious if any of you saw it coming. Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed everything you thought you knew? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you're finding this story of family betrayal and potential reconciliation compelling, please hit that like button to let me know. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Trust me, what happens at that lake cabin is something you won't want to miss. Now, let's get back to the story and see if my sister and I could actually survive a week alone together after 6 years of silence. 1 week after the funeral, Rachel and I found ourselves driving the familiar winding road to our family's cabin on Lake Winnipesaukee. The 3-hour journey from Boston had passed largely in silence, save for occasional stilted small talk about the weather and brief updates on our lives. The weight of 6 years of estrangement and the shocking revelations about our parents hung between us like an invisible wall. Daniel had offered to drive us, but I declined. This was something Rachel and I needed to do alone, just as our father had specified. Besides, I wasn't entirely sure I was ready to see my husband and my sister interact, given what we now knew about the complex history between our families. The cabin looked exactly as I remembered it. A rustic 2-bedroom structure, with a large stone fireplace and a wraparound porch that offered stunning views of the lake. As children, Rachel and I had spent countless summer days jumping off the private dock, building sandcastles on the small beach, and roasting marshmallows over campfires. The memories hit me with unexpected force as I turned off the engine. "Home sweet home," Rachel murmured, breaking the silence. It looks smaller than I remember. That's because you've been staying in 5-star hotels all over the world, I replied, immediately regretting the edge in my voice. This week would be difficult enough without sniping at each other from the start. Rachel sighed. Can we at least try to be civil, Jess? For Dad's sake. Fine, I agreed, grabbing my suitcase from the trunk. Civil it is. The interior of the cabin smelled of pine and distant wood smoke. A note on the kitchen counter informed us that Mrs. Callahan, the caretaker, who had looked after the property for years, had stocked the refrigerator and pantry for our stay. She had also left a bottle of our father's favorite whiskey with 2 glasses beside it. Dad thought of everything, Rachel said, running her finger along the bottle's label. Except telling us the truth while he was still alive, I countered, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Rachel's shoulders slumped. I keep thinking about all the opportunities he had to explain. All those holidays I skipped because I knew you'd be there, all those family gatherings where we carefully avoided each other. He watched us throw away our relationship, knowing he was the cause. I unpacked groceries in silence, processing her words. The anger I'd nurtured toward Rachel for so long had been misplaced, but the hurt remained real. 6 years of milestones missed, of inside jokes not shared, of the unique understanding that only sisters can have, all gone, because of our father's misguided attempt to protect me from a threat that never existed. That evening, we sat on opposite ends of the couch, the whiskey bottle between us still unopened. Rain pattered against the windows, and the lake beyond was a sheet of rippling grey. I scrolled mindlessly through emails on my phone while Rachel flipped through a magazine, neither of us ready to address the elephant in the room. Finally, Rachel set down her magazine with a decisive slap. This is ridiculous. We can't spend a whole week like this. Like what? I asked, though I knew exactly what she meant. Like strangers. Like we didn't grow up sharing a bathroom, and stealing each other's clothes, and knowing each other better than anyone else in the world. She reached for the whiskey bottle and uncorked it. Dad wanted us to reconnect, so let's reconnect. Truth for truth, just like when we were kids. The reference to our childhood game brought an unexpected smile to my lips. Truth for truth had been our ritual during teenage years, a safe space where we could confess crushes, insecurities, and dreams without judgment. It had been our way of maintaining the bond of sisterhood even as we grew into very different people. Fine, I agreed, accepting the glass she offered. You first. Rachel took a sip of whiskey, wincing at the burn. Truth. I've followed your career obsessively for the past 6 years. I have Google alerts set up for your name and your PR firm. I've read every interview you've given, every press release you've written. I even created a fake Instagram account to follow you. This confession stunned me. While I had deliberately avoided all news of Rachel, she had been keeping tabs on my life all along. Why? She shrugged, looking embarrassed. Because you're my sister. Because I missed you. Because I was too proud and too ashamed to reach out directly. She gestured toward me with her glass. Your turn. I took a long swallow of whiskey, feeling it warm my chest. Truth. I blamed you for everything that went wrong in my life for years after the wedding. When Daniel and I fought, when a client left my firm, when I miscarried last year, somehow in my mind, it all traced back to the moment you chose Paris over me. Rachel's eyes widened. You were pregnant. Oh, Jess, I'm so sorry. The genuine pain in her voice cracked something open inside me. It was early. 12 weeks. We haven't tried again since. She reached across the couch, her hand extended toward mine, but stopped short of touching me. I should have been there for you. Yes, you should have, I agreed, but without the anger that would have colored those words a few days ago. Your turn. Rachel refilled her glass, staring into the amber liquid. Truth, that trip to Paris with Jason. It wasn't the glamorous career launch I made it out to be. He promised me a shoot with a major fashion house, but it never materialized. Instead, he spent most of the trip drunk and trying to get me into bed. I ended up alone in a city I didn't know, too ashamed to admit I'd been duped, too broke to come home early. I felt a twist of something like sympathy. What did you do? I maxed out my credit card staying in a cheap hostel and taking tourist photos that I carefully edited to look like a high-end fashion shoot. I posted them with captions implying I was living this incredible life. She laughed bitterly. It was all fake, Jess. The beginning of my authentic influencer career was built on a complete lie. But you're successful now, I pointed out. The book, the clothing line, those are real. She nodded, swirling the whiskey in her glass. They are real, but they are built on a foundation of fiction. Sometimes I look at my life and wonder if any of it is actually mine or if it's all just content for the next post. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine. Your turn. I found myself wanting to offer something equally vulnerable, something that would bridge the vast distance between us. Truth, I've been jealous of you my entire life. Rachel nearly choked on her whiskey. You? Jealous of me? That's absurd. You're the one with the stable career, the perfect marriage, the life that makes sense. And you're the one who's fearless, I countered. You take risks, you follow your heart, you live in the moment. Do you know how many times I've sat in my perfectly decorated house wondering what it would be like to just let go? To not have every minute of every day planned and organized. The grass is always greener, Rachel murmured. I've envied your certainty, your ability to build something solid and lasting. My life might look exciting on Instagram, but it's exhausting never knowing where the next paycheck is coming from, constantly performing for an audience that will forget you the moment you stop entertaining them. We fell silent, the rain providing a gentle soundtrack to our confessions. For the first time in years, I felt like I was seeing the real Rachel, not the polished social media persona, not the sister who had betrayed me, but the complicated, flawed, human person she had become. For what it's worth, she said finally, I truly am sorry about missing your wedding. Even before I knew about Dad's manipulation, it was the biggest regret of my life. I nodded, acknowledging her apology without quite accepting it yet. Your turn, I said instead. Rachel took a deep breath. Truth, I've never had a relationship last longer than 6 months. Every time someone gets close to me, I find a reason to end it. I think I'm afraid of letting anyone see the real me. The me behind the filters and the curated posts. The real you isn't so bad, I said softly, surprising myself with the sincerity of the statement. She smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. The real me has missed her big sister something fierce. Something shifted between us then, some invisible barrier beginning to crumble. We weren't back to being the inseparable sisters of our youth, but we were no longer strangers either. We were somewhere in between, navigating a new and fragile connection. As the night deepened, the whiskey bottle grew emptier, and our truths became both more mundane and more meaningful. Rachel confessed her fear that her career would evaporate, as she aged out of the demographic her followers wanted to see. I admitted my growing dissatisfaction with corporate PR work and my secret desire to write a novel. We talked about our mother's affair and our father's misguided attempt to protect me, trying to understand the complicated humans our parents had been. When we finally went to bed in the early hours of the morning, I felt lighter than I had in years. The anger I'd carried for so long hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had begun to transform into something more complex and ultimately more healing. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Rachel moving around in the kitchen. For a moment, I could almost believe we were teenagers again, up early for a day of swimming and sunbathing. Then reality reasserted itself, bringing with it a dull headache from the previous night's whiskey and the weight of all we had yet to resolve. But as I made my way to the kitchen and accepted the mug of coffee Rachel offered, I realized something important. For the first time in 6 years, I was looking forward to spending time with my sister. The days at the cabin fell into a rhythm that was both familiar and new. Mornings were spent drinking coffee on the porch, watching the mist rise off the lake. We took turns cooking meals, discovering that Rachel had become surprisingly adept in the kitchen, a skill she'd developed for her lifestyle content, but had grown to genuinely enjoy. I found myself relaxing into her company, the old ease between us returning in fits and starts. On our third day, we decided to take out the old canoe that had been stored in the boathouse. Our father had taught us both to paddle when we were young, and the muscle memory returned quickly as we glided across the glassy surface of the lake. Remember when you tipped us over trying to stand up and see that cute boy on the opposite shore? Rachel asked, laughing as she dipped her paddle into the water. I smiled at the memory. Dad was so mad that his camera got wet. But he still made us hot chocolate when we got back to the cabin, Rachel added, her voice softening. He could never stay angry at us for long. We fell silent, the rhythmic splash of our paddles the only sound beyond birdsong and distant laughter from other vacationers. The shared memory of our father hung between us, not as a painful reminder of his deception, but as evidence of the love that had always been there, however imperfectly expressed. As we floated in a quiet cove, Rachel set down her paddle and looked directly at me. I need to ask you something, Jess. Something I've been wondering for years. I nodded, bracing myself. Are you happy? Really happy, I mean. Not Instagram happy or Facebook happy, but deep down, are you content with your life? The question caught me off guard. It wasn't accusatory or judgmental, just genuinely curious. And I realized with some surprise that no one had asked me that in a very long time. Most days, I answered honestly. Daniel is a wonderful husband. My business is successful. We have a beautiful home. I trailed off, aware that I was listing possessions and achievements rather than feelings. But? Rachel prompted gently. I sighed, trailing my fingers through the cool water. But sometimes I wonder if I've been so focused on building the perfect life that I forgot to actually live it. Does that make sense? She nodded. More than you know. I've spent years creating this image of a carefree, adventurous life, but most of the time I'm just exhausted. Always performing, always wondering if the next post will be the one that kills my career. She looked out across the lake. Sometimes I think about just stopping. Deleting all my accounts, getting a normal job, maybe even settling down. Would that make you happy? I asked, echoing her question back to her. I don't know, she admitted. That's the scary part. We paddled back to the dock in contemplative silence. As we secured the canoe, Rachel hesitated, then blurted out, I have a confession to make. My stomach tightened instinctively. What kind of confession? It's about Daniel, she said, not meeting my eyes. The day before your wedding, before Dad called me, I saw Daniel having lunch with a woman in that little cafe near your apartment. I froze. What are you saying? Nothing happened, she hastened to add. They weren't holding hands or anything romantic. But they were intense, and when I walked by to say hello, he seemed startled. Almost guilty. Then Dad called with his story about Daniel cheating, and it seemed to confirm what I'd seen. She finally looked at me. I know now that Dad was wrong about Daniel's motives, but I still wonder about that lunch. I stepped back, old suspicions flaring. So you're still trying to sabotage my marriage? Is that what this week is really about? No. Rachel looked genuinely distressed. I'm telling you because I don't want any more secrets between us. Maybe it was nothing. Probably it was nothing. But I saw what I saw, and it's been bothering me for years. I walked away from her, needing space to process this new information. Daniel had never mentioned meeting a woman the day before our wedding. But then again, why would he? It could have been a work colleague, a friend, anyone. And yet, the timing, combined with our father's suspicions. That night, I called Daniel from the cabin's landline, Rachel giving me privacy by taking a walk along the shore. When I heard his voice, warm and familiar, my doubts seemed suddenly ridiculous. "How's the sisterly bonding going?" he asked, and I could hear his smile. "It's complicated," I answered truthfully. "But better than I expected." I hesitated, then decided to be direct. "Daniel, did you meet with someone the day before our wedding?" "A woman, at Café Lucia." The silence that followed lasted just a beat too long. "Yes," he said finally. "I did." My heart sank. "Who was she?" "Her name is Eliza Winters. She's a jeweler." Of all the answers I might have expected, this wasn't one of them. "A jeweler? I was having something made for you, a surprise wedding gift. An heirloom piece that I wanted you to have on our wedding day." He paused. "I didn't tell you because I wanted it to be special." Relief washed over me, followed immediately by shame for having doubted him. "What was it?" "A sapphire pendant that belonged to my grandmother. It needed some restoration work, and Eliza is the best in the business. I was meeting her to pick it up." "But I never received a sapphire pendant," I said, confusion replacing relief. Another pause. "Because you never opened the gift. After the wedding, with everything that happened with Rachel, you were so upset. I tried to give it to you the next morning, but you said you didn't want any more surprises. The box is still in my dresser drawer, waiting for the right moment." Tears sprang to my eyes as I remembered that morning, how raw I had felt, how betrayed by Rachel's absence. I had indeed brushed off Daniel's attempt to give me a small blue box, too consumed by my own pain to recognize his gesture of love. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "Don't be," he said gently. "Maybe now is finally the right time." After we hung up, I sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of gold and pink. Rachel returned from her walk and wordlessly sat beside me. "He was having my wedding gift finalized," I told her. "A family heirloom that I never even opened because I was too busy being angry about you not being there." Rachel's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank God. I've been carrying that around for years, wondering if I should tell you." "Why did you tell me now?" I asked. She looked at me, her eyes clear and direct. "Because I want us to start over, Jess. Really start over, without secrets or misunderstandings or years of resentment. And that means putting everything on the table, even the things that are hard to say." I reached over and took her hand, a gesture that would have been unthinkable just days ago. "Thank you for telling me the truth." That night, we built a bonfire on the small beach and sat wrapped in blankets, watching the flames dance and listening to the gentle lapping of waves against the shore. The stars spread out above us in a dazzling canopy, more visible here away from the city lights. "Do you remember how Dad used to tell us the lake had healing powers?" Rachel asked, her voice soft with memory. I nodded. He said the Abenaki believed the waters could wash away old hurts and make broken things whole again. Maybe they were right, she said, stretching her hand toward the fire's warmth. As we sat there, surrounded by the natural beauty that had been the backdrop to so many childhood memories, I felt something shift inside me, the hard knot of anger that had lived in my chest for 6 years finally beginning to unravel. We weren't the same sisters we had been before the wedding. Too much had happened, too much time had passed. But perhaps we could be something new, something shaped by forgiveness and understanding rather than bitterness and blame. As the fire burned down to embers, Rachel pulled out her phone. I haven't posted anything in days, she said, sounding surprised by her own restraint. My followers are probably wondering if I've fallen off the face of the earth. What would you post about this? I asked, genuinely curious. About us. She looked thoughtful, then slipped her phone back into her pocket without taking a photo. Some things aren't meant to be content, she said simply. Some things are just for us. In that moment, I knew we would be okay. Not perfect, not instantly healed, but okay. And for now, that was enough. The last day of our mandated week together dawned bright and clear. We had spent the previous days continuing our truth for truth game, hiking the trails around the lake, cooking meals together, and slowly rebuilding the bond that had been severed 6 years ago. It wasn't perfect, we still had moments of tension, old habits of defensiveness that flared unexpectedly, but it was real in a way that neither of us had allowed our relationship to be for a long time. After breakfast, Rachel suggested we take one final canoe ride before packing up to leave. As we paddled toward the center of the lake, she seemed nervous, repeatedly adjusting her grip on the paddle and avoiding eye contact. I have one more truth to share, she said finally, when we had drifted to a stop in the middle of the lake. The biggest one. My stomach tightened with apprehension. What is it? Rachel took a deep breath. I am giving up my influencer career. I've been thinking about it for months, but being here with you, reconnecting with what's real, it's made the decision clear. She looked down at her hands. The book tour for my second book finishes next month, and then I'm done. No more perfectly staged photos, no more selling a lifestyle I'm not even living, no more pressure to be perpetually interesting and attractive. I was stunned. But what will you do? Your whole life is built around that career. That's just it, she said, looking up at me with a clarity I hadn't seen in her eyes for years. It's not a life, it's a performance. And I'm exhausted, Jess. I want something real. She hesitated. Actually, I already have a plan. I've been taking online courses in environmental science for the past year. I'm going to finish the degree, and then look for work with conservation organizations. Maybe use whatever influence I still have to advocate for causes that actually matter. Wow, I said, genuinely impressed. That's amazing, Rachel. But aren't you scared? She laughed, a sound of both nervousness and liberation. Terrified. But also excited in a way I haven't been about my work in years. She dipped her paddle into the water, creating small ripples. What about you? Any big life changes on your horizon? It was my turn to feel nervous. Actually, yes. I'm thinking of stepping back from the PR firm. Not completely, I still love the work, but enough to make room for something new. The novel. Rachel guessed, referencing my confession from earlier in the week. I nodded. And maybe a baby. Daniel and I have been talking about trying again. Rachel's face lit up with genuine happiness. Oh, Jess, that's wonderful. It's scary, I admitted. After the miscarriage, the idea of putting my heart on the line again. I trailed off, unable to fully articulate the fear. "You're the bravest person I know," Rachel said simply. "You'll be an amazing mother." We paddled back to shore in comfortable silence, both of us contemplating the new paths we were considering. As we pulled the canoe onto the dock for the last time, Rachel turned to me with a serious expression. "There's one more thing," she said. "Something I want to suggest, but I'm not sure how you'll feel about it." "What is it?" I asked, bracing myself. "I think we should divide Dad's estate differently than he specified." This was unexpected. "What do you mean?" Rachel sat on the edge of the dock, dangling her feet above the water. "Dad left the cabin to both of us, along with his savings. But I think you should have the cabin." "Rachel, no," I protested. "He wanted us to share it." "And we can," she assured me. "You'll never keep me away from this place again." She smiled, but then grew serious. "But you're the one who's thinking about starting a family. You're the one who's stayed connected to this place over the years. It makes sense for you to be the primary owner." I was touched by her generosity but hesitant. "What about you? What will you take?" "The savings," she said simply. "It's enough to give me a cushion while I finish my degree and transition to a new career. Plus, Dad's old Jeep. I've always loved that thing." I considered her proposal. It did make practical sense. Daniel and I had often talked about wanting a vacation home where future children could experience nature, and I had always imagined it being somewhere like the cabin. Rachel, with her more nomadic lifestyle, had less use for a fixed property. "Are you sure?" I asked. "This is a big decision." She nodded. "I'm sure. Consider it part of my apology for missing your wedding." "You're forgiven for that," I said, realizing as the words left my mouth that they were true. Somewhere during this week, without my consciously deciding it, I had let go of the anger I'd carried for so long. "It wasn't your fault." Still, she insisted. "Let me do this. For us, for our future." We shook hands solemnly, then burst into laughter at the formality of the gesture. Rachel pulled me into a hug instead, and I held onto my sister tightly, marveling at how the universe had brought us full circle, from estrangement back to connection, from misunderstanding back to truth. Later that afternoon, as we packed the car for the drive home, Rachel paused with her suitcase half closed. "Do you think Dad knew this would happen? That forcing us to spend a week together would actually work?" I thought about our father, his quiet wisdom, his deep love for both his daughters, and yes, his occasional manipulation for what he perceived as our own good. "I think he hoped," I said finally. "And I think he would be very happy to see us now." Rachel zipped her suitcase closed with a decisive motion. "Then we shouldn't waste any more time, should we? Life's too short for grudges. Dad taught us that the hard way." The drive back to Boston was entirely different from our tense journey to the cabin a week earlier. We talked freely, made plans for Rachel to visit Daniel and me the following weekend, and even sang along to the radio like we used to during family road trips. When we pulled up to my house, Daniel was waiting on the porch. His face registered surprise at our evident reconciliation, but his smile was genuine as he came down to help with the bags. "Welcome home," he said, kissing me before turning to Rachel. "Both of you." That evening, after Rachel had departed for her hotel with promises to return soon, Daniel presented me with a small blue box. Inside was the sapphire pendant he had described, a delicate antique piece set in platinum, with tiny diamonds surrounding the deep blue stone. "It was meant to be your something blue for the wedding," he explained as he fastened it around my neck. "Better late than never." As I touched the cool stone resting against my collarbone, I thought about all the misunderstandings, secrets, and missed opportunities that had shaped the past 6 years. But I also thought about the healing that had begun at the lake, the painful but necessary honesty, the rediscovered connection with my sister, and the new paths opening before us. The necklace wasn't just a belated wedding gift. It was a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful things can emerge from our most painful experiences, if only we are brave enough to face the truth and open enough to forgive. 6 months later, Rachel stood beside me in the hospital room, her hand gripping mine as the nurse placed my newborn daughter in my arms for the first time. "She's perfect," Rachel whispered, tears streaming down her face. "What's her name?" I looked down at the tiny face, so new and yet somehow familiar. "Hope," I said softly. "Her name is Hope." Rachel smiled through her tears. "It's perfect. Just perfect." As I held my daughter, with my sister beside me and my husband beaming proudly from the foot of the bed, I felt the circle of truth complete itself. The wounds of the past hadn't disappeared, they had transformed into wisdom, into strength, into a deeper capacity for love and forgiveness than I had ever known was possible. And that, I realized, was our father's true legacy, not the cabin or the savings or the Jeep, but this moment of perfect connection, of family healing, of hope for the future. It was what he had wanted for us all along. Wow, I can't believe we've reached the end of this incredible journey together. This story is so personal to me, and sharing it with all of you has been truly healing. If you've ever experienced family betrayal or reconciliation, I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Has karma ever come full circle in your family? Have you found forgiveness after years of estrangement? Your experiences might help someone else who's going through something similar right now. If this story touched you in any way, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life dramas and lessons learned the hard way. Don't forget to share this video with someone who might need to hear that reconciliation is possible, even after years of pain. Thank you so much for being part of my journey. I read every comment, and am so grateful for this amazing community we are building together. Until next time, remember that sometimes the greatest healing comes from the most unexpected places.